One of the most interesting things for me over all of these years in design is that the knowledge that I was given was not limited to the design of human beings. The design of human beings is interesting, but it is limited. There are so many things that are of interest. I have yet to really have an opportunity over the years to talk about the various forms, to really go into them in detail. It was so fascinating that in retrospect, when I look back on the information that I was given, that there were so many different constructs to look at. And I think that most fascinating to me was my own discovery of the validity of imprinting. After all, there is actually nothing more profound than the realization that we are imprinted and that this is the very nature of our being, is to accept imprinting. When I was first given the knowledge, the foundation of that was that we had subatomic particles called neutrinos, and that we were living in a very, very dense neutrino ocean. The thing that was interesting for me was that I had quite a background in science, and when I was going to school, when I was studying physics, neutrinos were not something that were mass. They were considered to be energy. As far as science understood, they traveled at the speed of light. They were the same as electrons. I can remember what it was like here on the island. It was St. Valentine's Day, February the 14th, 1992, in a little village called San Miguel. And there was a whole bunch of Ibiza friends. And it was the first time I tried to explain to them the information that I had been given. As a matter of fact, that recording still exists. You can actually get it at Jovi. Because it's interesting for there have been many people who said, well, you've changed all this from the beginning and blah, blah, blah. If you listen to my lecture in 1992, it's astonishing to realize that I'm still telling you exactly the same story. But what was interesting was the premise of neutrinos with mass. And the moment that you really begin to understand it, of course, this was eventually verified scientifically. This is something that's been part of science now for 7 or 8 years, and of course there's an enormous change that's taking place in the way in which we understand cosmology. It's very hard for them to understand what it means for us to be in a physical consciousness field that is penetrating us all the time. I started I think it was in 1994 that I began to demonstrate the way in which the mechanics of our interaction with the environment operates. See, that was my first experience when I went through in 1987 receiving the information. I was basically an existential nihilist who was a drug freak. It struck me as astonishing the premise of what I had received. And in a very, very rudimentary way, I constructed a kind of ephemeris for the moon so that I could actually experience the moon in relationship to my design. And I was also fortunate with the timing of the year. It was that time of the year in which my solar plex center and the potential of its activations was open to the very transiting position of the sun and the earth, part of that binary underneath Mercury and Venus. And so I watched the moon, and I've described this many times. It was the most extraordinary thing for me to become emotionalized simply by the presence of the moon in some abstract position in the sky. The scientist in me and the realist in me and the deeply Western man in me was shocked by that. I was shocked that this cold rock somehow, in some way, was altering my nature. And that in that I began a long journey of the recognition of helplessness. A helplessness that is so profound now that it has become the comedy of my life. This joke of incompetence and helplessness that is so beautiful about what it is to be and what it is to surrender to what it is to be, to let go of trying to be the masters of these vehicles, because these vehicles are perfect in and of themselves, and that we cannot control them because they are in fact in a deep, 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 deep program, and that the program is not a mystery. I mean, it's not a mystery, not anymore. It's so obvious, and it's so mechanical, and it really is a turning of a wheel. In '94, I began to do what I called Neutrino Forecasts. I began to show the interrelationship between somebody's design and the transiting program. There's many of you here, it's a mix today, but there are many of you here that have experienced this for a very long time and understand the impact of these forces. Only once in all the years that I've been teaching did I really teach larger cycles. In Taos, New Mexico, I think it goes back to 1996, was the only time that I actually sat with a group and laid out what global cycles were. Thanks. It was actually really a joke because they certainly at that point didn't have the background to really be able to grasp it. And it was really fun in a sense to, I never know what I'm going to say. And it was so interesting for me to talk about those things the first time, and to begin to see how this larger mechanic, how through that larger mechanic we begin to be able to participate in the evolutionary process. And for me, that's fun. Our lives are nothing. It's bang, and it's gone. And there is a sense that most of humanity never really appreciates their place in the flow. I know so clearly because we're living in the most deeply of mutative times. The most deeply of mutative times. There has never, ever, ever been such mutative pressure on humanity as there is now. And it's time for us to be allowed to see that mechanism, to see how the mechanism works, and to be prepared for what's coming. There's a darkness that's coming. And I don't mean to play melodrama, but it's fun. And it is Sunday morning after all. There's this darkness that's coming, and it's settling down over all of us. The human species, what we are, what we experience, what I like to call the killer monkey. The killer monkey is coming to an end. It's coming to an end. We are terminal, and we are in the terminal phase of our species' existence. Now, I'm not talking about some kind of great mystical biblical end. As a matter of fact, this is the denouement that will lead up to the end, because there's something else that's coming that is going to emerge out of us. It's seen in so many different ways and by so many different cultures and mysticisms. This understanding that we are approaching a very, very important time of transition. What I want to show you today and tomorrow is the actual mechanics of what's taking place, to see what we have been involved in for the last 400 years, since 1610, and that the framework of the way in which we look at civilization, no matter where you look at civilization on this planet, that the framework that was established from 1610, which is going to change in 2027, is not simply a transition that's going to lead to some magical, pleasant future. It's going to lead into an era that we are, as a whole, not prepared for, and even more so, not equipped for. We're at a point where the expansion of knowing and the expansion of knowledge is coming to an end. There is a door closing in on us. I have friends of mine who adore science fiction, and they adore the zoom, zoom, zip, zip, and they would all love to beam me aboard Scotty, and they all assume that beam me aboard Scotty is just around the corner. Well, it isn't. And The infrastructure to support it is dying. And the ability for us to replenish the stock, our stock, is dying. Fast, much faster than any of us are ready to admit. And our immune system, the global immune system, is deteriorating so quickly. You can see this by the onrush of antiviral madness. You know, we have a world filled with antiviral madness because we're not equipped anymore, because our species is no longer fertile. So I'm going to take you on a kind of, I like these journeys. Take you on a journey through the mechanism of the era that we are in and the one that is coming, and I will focus on that today. And tomorrow, I'll give you some real science fiction. I'll take you to the closing of the round, and I'll show you how, in the beautiful mechanics of all this, that all the pieces lock together and the door simply closes. When I first began to introduce human design, I used to do these very long intro lectures, did thousands and thousands of them around the planet. And I would always talk about the basic physical infrastructure and the nature of the physics and how all these things come together. And then I would talk about the fact that it's a synthesis of many different disciplines, whether those disciplines are pseudoscience or whether those disciplines are true science. And one of those elements is the Eastern astrology and the precession of the equinox. And everything that I'm going to be discussing is a global cycle that is rooted in the precession of the equinox. Now, by the way, this graph in here, this is a PDF, and I was caught in my birthday celebrations, and I did not manage to get this up on the web last night. So I will put it up on the web tonight, and I'll give you the address now so you know, and you can download it and have it. www.hdvc.org/ROS office/cycle, lowercase, CYCLE. Did I? Okay, let me give it another name. Global. Let's just call it global. Okay, lowercase, global.zip. There's a couple of things that you need to understand about the nature of this graphing. And the first thing to understand is that there are two elements in the way in which we are going to look at the way in which the cycles operate. And that the first thing to see is that we are moving backwards. In other words, we are actually moving clockwise if you're looking at the movement in the wheel. And if you look here, you can see running through here, this is where we are now. This is a period that started in 1615, pardon me, I said 1610, 1615, and this is going to end actually at 2027. In other words, it's going to go through this process. And at this particular time, and we talk about it a lot, that we're dealing with the cross of planning. That is the 37, the 40, the 9, and the 16. And all of us know that we are in the 37th gate in the first line. That's where the precession of the equinox is right now. And in 2027, it's going to move back a step, which is going to place it into the 55th gate. And the 55th gate, the 6th line. And as we know, the 55th gate is a mutative gate. This is the chemistry of the genetic codon of histidine. This is where the mutation is taking place in the solar plex center. This is where you have the impact on prostate cancer, autism, all of these things through this mutation. But when you're looking at this configuration, I want you to recognize something, that this movement of the precession, that these elements of the precession are called keys, but there is a lock. In other words, each of these keys fits into a lock. Now the key is the precession and its structure itself, and the lock are humans. In other words, this is the way in which any global cycle directly imprints into humanity. And global cycles only imprint into humanity through people who happen to be vessels or sphinxes. Now, it's not just people who are vessels and sphinxes, it also pertains to anyone who has any of the gates of the G-center. In other words, what we're looking at is that we're looking at something actually very fascinating. What we're looking at is the nature of the magic of the magnetic monopole. I mean, it is really something to understand about this phenomena, this holding us together in the illusion of our separateness and moving us along our fractal line, moving us along our line of geometry. And that movement along our line of geometry, the thing that holds us together as a species, the thing that holds us together as a totality within the programming of the whole, that all of this is rooted in the G-center. The G-center. When we're looking at the G-center, of course, we are looking at identity. In other words, when we're looking at it in an individual chart, what we're looking at is the quality of identity in that being. We've got role gates here, the roles of our interaction with the world around us. You know, we have directional gates. We have gates in which here specifically, when you're looking at the cross of the Sphinx or you're looking at the cross of the vessel, these are the only Incarnation Crosses, as an example, that operate exclusively out of one center. That the G-center is very special because it forms specifically the 8 different corners or the 8 different points of the wheel. Remember, when you're looking at the structure in terms of the way that the hexagrams of the I Ching operate, that what you're looking at is the wheel naturally breaks up first into its 4 quarters. And we know from the 4th quarters that we're always going from a Sphinx gate, which is a gate of direction, and we're going to close with one of the gates of the 4 ways before we get to the next Sphinx gate. The other thing is that in the middle of each quarter, exactly in the middle of each quarter, is a vessel of love gate. And it's one of my earliest comments about the nature of identity. And again, when you look at the G-center, what you're looking at is this capacity to be able to go out and to touch everything that is there in the whole. And at the same time to be able to see that that's the way that everything from the whole gets taken inward. So when we're looking at the G-center in terms of general programming, the gates here become very significant. In other words, anyone who is carrying one of these lock gates is part of the way in which the program as a whole gets to manifest in the world. I mean, one of the things to realize about the program is that you're only dealing with input. You know, the program is just this huge ocean of consciousness. But the ocean of consciousness is transformed by the mass of uniqueness that filters it. You know, here we all are filtering this consciousness field. And one of the things that you get to see in design whenever you're looking at analysis is that you get to see that each and every human being is truly unique in the way in which they interact with the program and also in the way in which they provide a contribution to the whole. I mean, the damn thing's an illusion. So, you know, one of the things to recognize is that you cannot live in an illusion unless you are contributing to it. I mean, you know, it's not like we're outside of the illusion. It's not any of this hip shit about you're going to be outside of the illusion. It's always my joke about sticking your head through the sky. If you stick your head through the sky and you leave it there, someone's going to kick you in the ass. You know, because you can't live that way. We are the illusion, we make the illusion, we live the illusion. So it's important to see that it's not so much that these beings are special any more than any activation anywhere is special. But to understand that the program is not just something out there, it's here. When I talk about these global cycles, it's essential to understand it's not like something's changing out there. It's changing in here. You know, it's not like there's anything to blame in all of this. You know, this is just the way the program operates. So these changes that are taking place, when you look at the world around you, and we'll talk about this relative to our civilization, our politics of the time, the spirituality, the fundamentalism, all of this can be put down to the closing of this particular cycle. All of it. And that you can see within the framework of this cycle, from 1615 to now, that the very things that have allowed all of this to emerge is that we've been living this program and putting it out relative to each other with every breath, with every connection. So the first thing to see is that we have 2 kinds of locks. In other words, we have a lock that is a lock that comes from the 4 gates of the vessel, and we have a lock that comes from the 4 gates of the Sphinx. And one of the things that you can see is that when the round closes, they lock into each other. In other words, they literally lock into each other, they fold in, and that literally is the end. Okay, and that's the end of a round, that's the close of the whole process. So everything is moving towards this locking phenomenon. So we have two sets of locks, and then we have the keys, and the keys represent the actual positioning of the precession of the equinox, and then its complementary 7 points around the wheel. Complementary 7 points. In other words, those are going to be 7 points that are going to be 8 hexagrams apart. In other words, the same dynamic, but the dynamic shifting because the equinox has shifted. So, for example, this 25, 46, these vessel gates, you can see here with the 37, 49, 16, this is their exact relationship to that structure. And when you move along, you will see that relative to the Sphinx gates, the same thing is true. In other words, these 8 points, they're all structured 8 hexagrams apart. It's just the shifting of the equinox. So let's begin. It started in 1615, and it started with the 37th gate as the equinox gate, and you can see that the lock is the 25. The 37th gate is the gate of the family. It is the gate of the need for God. For not only the need for God, but the need to build temples to God. It is the need for secure bonds in the family. It is the need for moral law. It is the need for those that will work for the benefit of the community, and we find that in the complementary 40th gate. In other words, we have been living in an age since 1615 in which the most dynamic theme has been community. And not simply community in the sense that this is primitive tribal community, but this is the development of tribal community that goes from being tribal rulership to city-state, to nation-state, to national institutions. In other words, the whole structure of community, everything is built into that. The work from 1615, it was required by the program that humanity would have to work harder and harder and harder just to be able to maintain the structure that they were programmed to build. I mean, there has never been a greater enslavement in the history of humanity to this bargain of security comes from community. And out of that security comes from community, we have all of the things that are rooted in the 4037, which is my tribe's better than your tribe, my government's better than your government, my God's better than your God, my business is better than your business, and all of the stuff that goes with it. And since 1615 till 2027, we have been stuck in the most deeply material period in the history of humanity. Never before has there been such an accentuation on materialism. And it's not like it's our fault. It's not like there's good guys and bad guys in the materialism business. That Pope John Paul, who leaves dog shit, is better than Bill Gates, who will leave a zillion. It's not about that. It's about understanding that all of us in the yin and yang, this and that of what the spectrum is, that we've all been caught in the material wheel. And don't think that it's going to be a great relief when it goes away. Because it isn't. But nonetheless, this is what the 4037 brought us. Now, when you think about the 37th gate as a key, think about the lock that it opens. This deep need, because it is a need in the 37th gate. This deep need for the infrastructure of community is the very spirit of us. And that very spirit through the 25th gate is the gate of the priest and the priestess. You know, it is the gate of blood. It is the gate of the sacrament. And that so much of what we have seen over the last 400 years is that this whole search has tied us deeply, deeply to old tribal myths. We have never lived in a more religious time. Ever. I mean, ever. I mean, it's one of the things that's so spooky to me. I mean, I'm not religious. I mean, I'm talking about religion. I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm not talking about mysticism. I'm not talking about magic. I'm talking about institutions. It's like this whole movie with the Pope. What a movie. This stinking old institution. Thousands of years, you know. And it is this institution that's going to come down. You see, the moment that we move away from an imprint that flows through every single human being on the planet that you cannot escape, that locks us into this tribal configuration, when that goes out the window, all of these institutions will begin to crumble. They will not be sustainable. It's not going to be in us to even want to. I mean, think about that. We are not naturally designed as humans to get along with each other so well. I mean, after all, institutions are artificial ways of maintaining peace. I mean, it's what they do. It's a way of controlling the killer monkey, our savageness. It's very difficult to find a way to be impressed with the not-self of what it is to be human, and to see the ugliness and pain that an epoch such as this has brought to so many. The very imperative to reproduce, to create so many human beings, is not about the excuses that people come up with, that it has to do with poverty and they need more children, or they don't have contraception, or they don't know this, or they don't know that. It's not true. We've been living in an age where reproduction is a theme that is pumped through everybody. The tribe cannot survive without it. Power to the people. Well, you need the people. And the 4037 demands more and more and more and more and more and more and more of them. More workers to build the temples, to maintain the temples, to kneel in the temples. I mean, you know, it's one of the jokes. The more human beings you get, the more people in the bureaucracy. You know, it just goes on and on and on. But this is our era. Every single human being that carries the 25th gate, I carry the 25th gate. You know, I'm a lock that allows that key in. I mean, I'm as responsible for maintaining this theme of materialism as anybody else, even more so in some cases. And you know, you pay a lot of money for me, all that stuff. I'm not poor, all that stuff. We live in an age of materialism. And it's coming to an end. Good thing, man, that it's going to be in 2027, you know, because I can hang up my shingle, you know, and just sort of retire and watch the wheel turn. And that we see within the whole nature of the 4037 materialism that one of the things about the tribe is that there are always those that are not allowed to come to the table. And we live in a world in which so many are not allowed to come to the table. And then we think that there is villains, and we look to blame, you know. It's their fault, it's this fault, you know. Let's change the political system. Let's change the leadership. Let's change the spirit of humanity. Can't do that. It's like somebody saying to you, you should change. You know, smack them when they say that. What the hell are they talking about? Nobody changes. We are what we are. It is what it is. It's going to be what it's going to be, and no raging against the wind is going to stop this curtain from dropping. Nothing. Nothing. When you look at the 40th gate, the 40th gate being the opposition to the 37, and the 40th gate is connected to the 46, and remember that the 46th gate is all about the body. And it's the body as the temple. This is the place. And this whole body is the temple. That one of the things to see about the 40th gate is a gate of denial. It's a gate of denying God. It's a gate of denying the value of relationships, of friendship, of all of these things. And yet, of course, when it's bound to the 37 gate, you get this whole community structure. But think about the relationship to the 46th gate, which is about the body. And one of the things to understand is that the body is deteriorating at a very rapid rate. And one of the first things that came with this cycle was what we call medicine. When we were doing, looking at tone and bass and chain, you know, I was talking about this phenomena of, you know, juxtaposition makes things happen. You know, the moment that you have two things and you bring them into proximity to another, there is a quantum effect. And that quantum is the whole that's larger than the sum of its parts. And one of the things to see about the nature of the mutation, remember that when we entered into the cycle in 1615, we were already in a process that was opening up to mutation. In 1781, we had the advent of the nine-centered being. You know, this is the beginning of the mutation that leads to the fulfillment of that transition that's going to take place post-2027. And it's also one of the things to see about us as humans is that since 1781, we have no longer had, at the deepest level of our genetic imprinting, a future in front of us. And there has been a slow deterioration in the immune system. And when you think about it in a holistic way, think about it this way. In 1781, as our body temperatures began to increase, we began to pollute the environment in a way that had never been done before. We began to put additives into the environment that were going to go along with the fact that our very vehicles themselves were beginning to deteriorate. In other words, all of these things were built into the fact that we are being sterilized slowly, that we are losing our capacity to be creative, that all of this is pointing us down this road of transition, and it's been going on for a long time. Complementary to that, because you cannot, you know, in order to stop a gene from wanting to be alive, you got to put a stake through its heart. You know, it's the basic premise of existence. And so the counterpoint, and there is always the yin-yang, the counterpoint is the moment the body is beginning to go bad, science gets good, medicine gets good. You know, the moment the immune system begins to go into the toilet, we start inventing all kinds of ways of protecting the immune system. I mean, the fact that people live longer, one of the whole things about the life program is that the only thing that provides for the potential of consciousness is longevity. It's why that most of the really ancient and wise societies had enormous respect for the aged. And had enormous respect for the aged, not necessarily because they were automatically wise with age, but this understanding of the basic program. The program demands that if we don't live long enough, we never get that opportunity to really be conscious. And so this incredible struggle, you know, at the same time that our vehicles are provided with the opportunity to live longer, is at the very time when the vehicle itself is in deterioration. It's the joke at the end of the game. It's always the joke at the end of the game. I mean, I like the joke, but I have a black sense of humor. I mean, I think it's very funny. I think it's very funny that everything that we think of as progress has been band-aids for the fact that we're going out the door. You know, until we get to the point that, you know, we've become radically insane. You know, children who are born who can't breathe the air. You know, that you keep them in tanks all their life. I mean, we're going out. And there's this deep, deep, deep malaise that lies within the soul of humanity. Because we are mutative creatures, and we are the program, and we know. I watch with curiosity the incredible rise of fundamentalism since 1960. And in 1961, we had the transition from the second line of the 37 to the first line. We got into the foundation lines. And of course, in understanding the construct of the hexagram, if you look at the first line, you get to see that the whole nature of the infrastructure is there. Every first line, you know, opens up a window of knowledge in understanding the whole. And at the moment that we went into that first line theme, we went back to fundamentals. We went back to the basic foundations. You know, the moment that you get to the end of something, there is always this reaction. Nothing likes becoming extinct. Nothing. You know, there is resistance in anything that is threatened with extinction. And so you have to see that as the species is moving towards this close, as we entered into this first line fundamental theme, as we live through the end of a pattern that says the only glue for community is God. I mean, the 4037, that's its mantra. The only glue for humanity is God. And it's not even God. It's that temple that you sit in where you think you can meet God. It's the structure that's provided for you to be able to access not God, but to be held together as a glued community with a singular focus and protection. First line theme is a theme of fear. We're living in an age of deep fears. You know, I remember in the 1960s, right at the very beginning, having to hide under my desk at school because it was a atomic bomb air raid preparation drill. Jesus, hide under my desk? You know? I mean, what a fucking joke, eh? All these kids under their desks, you know? Is the bomb over now? We live with fear. As a matter of fact, we cannot be without it. You know, you've got all these fanatics out there, they're afraid of everything. You know, the ozone's opening up. Full of fear. And of course, when killer monkeys are afraid, they're really dangerous. They are. Not only are they dangerous, they're obsessive and fanatical. There's nothing worse than putting these beings with their back to the wall. And so you have this enormous rise of reactionism. And it's everywhere. It's not, you know, most people now, unfortunately, they just nail it as Islam. I'm more terrified of Christian fundamentalism than I am of Islamic fundamentalism. Any day of the week. They've got more atomic bombs, you know? They're really spooky. I mean, there is fundamentalism at every level, in every religion on the planet. Every religion on the planet. It's an epidemic. I mean, I don't know if there's any crazy Shinto fundamentalists running around, but I assume there are. You know, they've all gone a little strange at the edges because it's going out the door. They don't think their species is dying out, not in the way in which I'm describing it. They don't. And so you have this enormous struggle that appears to be taking place. I mean, it appears to be taking place. Most people think that this struggle on the surface is the illusion of globalization and, you know, these two sides of the story. But you see, they're the same. They feed off each other. And they're both going to disappear, and they're both under the same pressures. Both of them. Because this age This age rooted in the materialism of community. This age is coming to an end. And globalization is nothing more than money laundering, after all. I mean, globalization is just a way of moving the energy. But it only operates within the constructs of the materialism that's been activated and lived out in this time. In this 400-year slab. And everybody thinks it's going to last forever. You know, this illusion that it's going to get better and we're going to get smaller and smaller gadgets and we're going to swallow them and then we don't need anything and we just push buttons on our body or something. I mean, it's one of the great jokes for me. It's like, you know, it's like the guy who knew that the Dark Ages were coming. You know, and you're standing there and you're saying, hey, look, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You know, it's all going to fall down. And don't even build that thing now. It's like I watch this, you know, these forces that are involved in long-term projects, going to Mars. I think going to Mars is the litmus test of my accuracy. If they get to Mars and I'm alive, you know, I'll eat the planet. I don't know. I'll fall on a sword, you know. It's not going to happen. It's not. It's amazing. It's not. None of that. And the interesting thing for me is that the geneticists don't know what I know. That's clear. And they don't know something that would change the way that they would look at the nature of our being. This mutation, there is something in this chemical mutation that is destroying us. It is. It's like if you Google the word disease. I mean, 2,000 years ago, there were probably 3 things that killed you. You know? Google disease. It is incredible. Yeah, there are thousands of them. I mean, there are thousands of them. There's so many fucking diseases. It's incredible. And then you know, and then they think there's a cure. That's the first problem. The second problem is that they see the disease as something that has arisen out of a vacuum. You know? We have a new disease. We are deteriorating at an incredible rate. And none of these geneticists are going, you know, I just noticed something. I mean, don't you get that? One day they tell you, if you drink tomato juice 3 times a week, you're going to die. The next week they tell you, you really should drink tomato juice because it's going to help your liver. And then the next week they tell you, in liver tests, we have discovered that tomato juice, it has nothing to do with tomato juice. I mean, it's in the species. We have enormous problems looking at forests. You know, it's all these little trees. I've been warning everybody about avian flu now for years. You know, this thing, when it comes, and it's going to come, and nothing on God's earth is going to stop this smart little retrovirus from finding a way to plague us. Nothing. And when it comes, it's going to be devastating. I mean, I think most of us in the West may be, because of the medical infrastructure and the fact that there's wealth to buy the antivirals, we may have an opportunity not to really be overwhelmed by it. And that's only the beginning. It's like the story with AIDS. It's always been there. It's a monkey disease, for Christ's sake. It's been there forever. But forever we had an immune system that was really tough. We had an immune system that was able to get to the top of the food chain. We were tough killer monkeys, healthy killer monkeys. For 400 years, we have been hidden from the sun every day. I mean, how devastating that has been to our immune system. We have been cut off from the sun, and we're cut off from the sun from this. It wasn't to say that people didn't have shelters. There were shelters. You know, but you didn't sit in the cave watching TV. You went out and did something. 1615, then we started building factories. Big ones, dark ones. We started packing human beings inside. What happens when you spend your life living inside? Your immune system takes a whack. You breathe stale, dead air, other people's stale, dead air, on and on and on. I mean, the most terrifying thing for me about flying is that I'm flying with 75 lungs or 300 lungs or whatever, and the shit that's in them. And we never see things that way. We don't. You know, we see them from inside the rooms. This whole period that everybody thinks is so incredible. Look at what we've been able to do. Jesus, we have mishap, you know? Give me a break. What you have to see is that we have helplessly been driven to all of this. Because there is only one goal in consciousness. I mean, one is, you know, you go forward and multiply. But you know, when the multiplying game is over, what else is there? We're here to seek knowledge. I mean, what is the point otherwise? There is no other point. You know, you look at the serendipity of what it is to be incarnated into one of these vehicles, and from everything I understand about the nature of being, that what we think of as ourselves is a passenger locked in a helpless vehicle in a program. And that passenger spends most of his existence screaming and crying because it doesn't like where it's going and it doesn't like what's happening. And for me, it's clear that all of the intelligence and the consciousness of this planet now, whether it's esoteric or exoteric, is simply about getting to a point of just understanding how you can get out of the pain of what seems to be the pointlessness of the human experience. And that the only way that you get out of that pain is when you let go of this life being something you're here to control. I mean, you know, the real joy of my life is that in a few words, I can give somebody a strategy for their type, and I can send them out into the world, and I can watch them eliminate resistance, and I can see the transformation in their consciousness. And I mean, once you get to a point where, you know, you stop trying to be in control and you start watching, it's the only thing to do, is the movie. And our physical vehicles and our physical creativity is going nowhere. I mean, at the mystical level, you all know that for many, many years now, I've been telling you that in 2027, we will have another species on this planet. It will emerge out of us. It will be very different from us. That emergence is something that I have spent a great deal of time contemplating. I mentioned the other day that I often think about, and it's one of the things about living in Spain. Spain has a very interesting Neolithic history, and Spain was probably the last place where Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal lived together. It has happened very often in our history, and it has happened very rapidly. After all, one of the things to realize about approaching the end of the round is that our evolutionary process and the way that we are moving, it's faster and faster and faster and faster. We are racing towards the door in the way in which we have developed. The 9 and the 16, you see the 10. The 10 is a strange lock. It's all about behavior. Everything about the 10th gate. You know, this is one of my favorite lines. Treading on the tail of the tiger, beware. It's wonderful. You know, the magic of behavior, the magic of the potential of what I teach, which is that we are here to recognize our uniqueness and in that love ourselves. Love ourselves as deity, as Godhead. That there is no comparison. This is the magic of what it is to be correct as yourself, to live by your own authority. That there is no other authority. In fact, if all of us were living our authority, could live our authority, at least we could enjoy embracing the arrival of what's coming. What was it like for that Neanderthal to see that Cro-Magnon come into his valley? And what brought them to an end? Were they destroyed? My assumption is that they were killed. I mean, given my understanding of the killer monkey, I think that we would not put up with any competition. We're not good at accepting competition. You know, I've talked a lot about how popular culture, science fiction, that all of these things have been predicting the same mechanism. And my favorite illustration is the film The Alien. You know, the first time that we got this collective psychic hit, you know, this moment where audiences literally all over the planet screamed, you know, when this thing suddenly emerges out of the body of a human being. And there is a shock wave that's coming. And it's a shock wave that is not necessarily going to be consciously perceived. Remember, the fact that we can talk about timelines doesn't mean that consciousness is going to recognize, accept. It's going to take a long time. I mean, one of the things about the online university that I'm beginning in September is that I will be teaching a program of rave cosmology, and basically it's about educating people to how to recognize these children when they come, and how to be able to deal with their mothers, and how to be able to find a way to protect these beings. And you see, when it becomes clear to humanity that the spectrum of disease and the problems of the collective psychology are rooted to their terminality, I'm rather concerned about what the reaction will be. Behavior. We have been very conditioned to have a very, very specific kind of behavior. This era of these hundreds of years that we have been dealing with the behavior of this, this focus on all these details. The ninth gate. Detail, 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 detail. It is the very basis of our scientific world. It's the very basis of our ability to go down into the minutiae. I mean, I like being a highly educated scientific freak. You know? I mean, I like that. Because I like both those worlds. And I have always seen, because I am a dualist, I have always seen that there is this incredible relationship between these two worlds the moment that you bring them into juxtaposition with each other. I mean, that's, again, this is the real magic. And this detail. I'll never forget my first trip to Los Angeles to teach. And I'm in one of these Beverly Hills hotels. Very funny scene. And an ad had been taken out for my visit. And my coordinator had brought in one of these big Los Angeles esoteric directories. Now, this is the kind of thing that was published once a month. And in that thing, because it was really a thing, I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. It was about 1,500 pages, newsprint kind of paper, of nothing but ads for esoteric services and knowledge. I mean, anything you could think of, from the most bizarre and wacky, you know, to the standard NLPs, blah, 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 you know, and everything in between. People that were selling mantras, offering mantras, whiz-bangs, boo-boos, you name it. You know, every kind of shaman, guru, whippy-dippy. It was amazing. There were thousands and thousands of them. I mean, there was at least 40 or 50 a page. Around the time where I had the experience with the voice, I was living in a ruina not far from the village of San Juan. And I had a friend of mine, a very old friend of mine, David. And he was trained as a scientist. He was actually trained as a geologist. And he was one of the few guys that actually had enough money to have subscriptions to magazines in those days. And he subscribed to the New Scientist. And one day I'm up on the terrace above my ruina, and I see down below at the road, I see his car pull up. And I see him get out of his car, and he goes to his trunk, and he takes out 2 bundles. And he puts these 2 bundles at the bottom of the little walkway that I would take to go up to my room, and leaves. And so I go down there, and I grab these 2 bundles. It was 2 years of The New Scientist. Right? And The New Scientist came out every week, so there was about 100 of these things. And I bring them up to my ruina. And I sit down underneath my fig tree, and I put these 2 bundles in front of me. And then I started to laugh. I have never, it's the only time in my life that I was really frightened. I mean, Datura demons, the voice, shocks, but really frightened of my death. I laughed so much, I truly thought that I was going to die. I got into a panic because I couldn't stop laughing. I was rolling around in the dust. It was so amazing to me. Here were all these scientists, millions and millions and millions of them on the planet. All this ninth gate detail, right? The journey of 1,000 miles, and all these people doing all the steps, endlessly doing these steps. And here's this ridiculous freak, just sitting there. And they gave it all to me. It was free. It dropped from heaven. And all the thought and all the science of 2 years from all the scientific disciplines. And I'm reading this stuff. It was amazing. This is our age. This is our time. There's so much minutiae available out there that nobody can digest it. It is this endless minutiae, because we're all trying to get to the source. How does it work? Why does it work the way that it does? Who is responsible? This is just getting down to the meat. And when you take the 2 sides, you can see. I remember the first time that I taught juxtaposition theory, 9-dimensional theory. 2 weeks later, Hawking's in his wheelchair starts sprouting about 9-dimensional universe. And it's like, yes, good. After all, human design is the only revelation that's been substantiated by science. It's one of its jokes, that it's this and that. And you have to see that our behavior for hundreds of years has been focused on all these little details. And all these little details are the bedrock of collective transcendence. The collective theoretical transcendence. We're waiting for the theory of everything. And of course, quantum scientists now are going crazy because they don't know what to do with neutrinos. It's almost as if they like to say, well, can we go back to the way we used to see things? What do you do when 60% of the mass of the universe is neutrino? And we're all in it. So this detail, what do you think's going to happen when we leave this age in which that detail is alive in all of us? Remember, this is not an abstract thing. It's not like it's out there. It's in us. In every single one of us, either directly or indirectly, either as lock or as key, or through your connection to the aura of somebody as lock or key, and on and on and on. And what do you think is going to happen when we get to that place where that's not the imprint? Everything about our modern society runs on detail. Can you fix your mobile phone by yourself? Do you even know how the electricity in your house works? Everything about materialism has been based on detail. The way that we produce machines and all of these things. Go into a factory where they're producing some kind of modern, sophisticated machine and ask any single worker how to put the whole thing together, and they don't know. I just do this. And what happens when nobody knows how to do that? You have to see that we've got a whole planet that's dug into this detail to the point that we don't know how anything works. And what happens when the lights go out? We're fucked. And you don't want to see a Western killer monkey without their washing machine and their TV, let alone that the elevators don't work. you don't want to be in that neighborhood. Oh, all of those beings, you know, you watch. I love watching movements. I mean, I you know, it's so fascinating to see the way things work. You know, the back to nature people. You know, it's like they know. You know, I need my own electricity. I need my own water supply. I got to grow my own food. I think one of the more beautiful things is actually that the very, very poor, you know, this great Christian joke about the poor shall inherit the earth, which I just always thought that meant that the rich were on vacation. You know, I never understood that. But that the poor should actually inherit the earth, that's really a joke, because it's going to work that way in many ways. They're much better equipped to deal without the minutiae than we are. I mean, you know, the only risk to them is that they are being infected by the propaganda of the end of this material age. But we also see that there's an enormous rejection at certain levels to that. And understandably so. We in the West are the ones that are going to feel that impact. Robot culture. I mean, why do you think you have all these robot movies and robot stories? And do you realize that there are thousands and thousands of different kinds of robots being built all the time and being developed all the time now? I mean, they're not being built for toys. The minutiae business. This is really going to be an enormous challenge because it's going out the door. And if you don't have something that knows how to do something, you're not going to find it. You're not going to know how to do it. I used to have that with my car. You know, when I was 13, I made a great choice in life. You know, either I was going to learn how to change a carburetor, or I was going to learn how to make love. And I went for sex. Many of my buddies went for carburetors. And they're the kind of people that when their car breaks down, they fix it. You know? I mean, some of my favorite moments in Ibiza, you know, was my car dying on some Camino in the middle of nowhere, and me getting out of the car and starting to walk away. You know, and my wife yelling after me, do something, you know? And the idea that I would open the hood and look inside, because I would do that just to please her, right? I'd open the hood, I'd look inside and say, it's really damaged, you know? What to do? And I go walking. And I mean, think about a world that way. I mean, it stops being funny real quick. I mean, real quick. I mean, nobody thinks about how fast things are running out. Nobody. You know, it's like oil. I mean, China has a huge appetite right now. I mean, at a level that is mind-boggling. Aside from the fact that they are the world's most incredible polluters, they're sucking up energy from this planet at a rate that you cannot imagine. And this oil reserve business, you know, I mean, you know, easily within 10 years, you're going to have $100 a barrel oil, and it's going to get worse. I mean, there's a lot of things that are all moving in the same direction at the same time to the same place. And so this whole business about us being in the detail, and we're going to know how to deal with things, and we're going to know how to fix things, and we're going to know how to replace things. There is nothing on this planet that is going to replace petroleum. Nothing. Oh, there are little things that'll do this and that. You know? It's not, you know, it's not like some genius is going to show up in the next 10 years and say, oh, got it. We've got something new. We're not allowed that. It's not in the program. I mean, it's not in the program. You know, it's one of the things that I've been telling people for years. We have now, you know, we've got 22 years left to get answers. And by the way, if we don't get all the answers, it's not like we fail any test, it's just tough luck. I mean, it's not like the program cares. We've already done the job. I mean, we have an extraordinary level of potential consciousness on this planet. Self-reflected consciousness has developed to a point that, you know, these kinds of exchanges are possible, and possible in so many places in the world today. But this whole business of looking at the world that we're in and seeing that there is some kind of continuity that we're moving towards, forget it. That's not what's happening. And that the very behavior of humanity is going to change. And when that behavior changes, it is going to change radically, because it's going to go from the 9th gate and detail to the 34th gate, which is a gate of raw, pure power. And power that isn't necessarily nice power. It is the power necessary to be able to survive. It is the deepest driving energy within us. It is asexual, potentially violent, totally existential, and absolutely does not care about the other. Now, that's not detail. That's not logical detail, impacting everyone, bringing out all these small little pieces of information, giving us this whole expansion of science and medicine and all of these things. Story over. 34th gate is part of integration. Integration is what we began with as a survival mechanism. And we are returning directly to that. Individual survival. For 18 years, I have been teaching people that the only thing is for you to be your own authority, because if you're not your own authority, you do not experience the purpose and uniqueness of your incarnation. But it's more than that. It is a preparation for a time in which, if you cannot be your own authority, nobody is going to be that authority for you. We live in an age now where everybody wants to be an authority for everybody else. You know, all the old bullshit about you're the sheep and I'm the wolf and here we go. And it's an old mechanism. You know, the teacher and the student and the this and the that and the master and the disciple and blah, 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 blah. All that's coming to an end. I mean, I know that from my own role. This is the end of this movie. And so it should be. Boring trip. Once you can transform surrender into a mechanical process, which is what human design offers, you don't need any teachers in that sense. You just simply need somebody who will kindly let you know about it. And that the individual and individual authority is the only thing that will protect us in the future. Us. I'm not talking about rave children who operate in pentas. We're going to be on our own as authorities. Doesn't mean we are going to be alone. But the whole collective tribal imprint is going away, and it's fading. Every day, it's fading. The 16th gate and its relationship to the 15th. Now think about the 15th gate. The 15th gate is part of that logical process. It is universal to all forms of life. It is the rhythm of life. And more than that, at a mystical level, this is where we have the potential of the love of humanity. And the 16th gate is a gate of skills. Skills. And so the whole process in these 400 years has been the development of skills for the benefit of humanity. And we have these enormous amount of skills that have been developed. I mean, when I think about how fast it is and how 1960 really is a marker, right? I can remember when I was a kid, first of all, you had a doctor and the doctor came to your house. And your doctor was a doctor. I mean, if you got a bad toe, if you had a bad ear, that was your doctor. And the doctor came to your house and say to you, I can't look after you, you need a specialist over here or here or here or here or here. Within years, all that changed. All of a sudden, they didn't come to your house. All of a sudden, there wasn't one kind of doctor, but there were many kind of doctors, and it began expanding all the time. You know, you've got big toe doctors and little toe doctors and everything in between. It just kept on layering out all these different skills. Everything about the whole incarnation program is about consciousness in form. And everything about consciousness in form is about witness consciousness. In order for the totality, in that sense, to be correct, All the various possibilities of form have to be experienced consciously. And that you see in this whole movement towards detail and skills, and all within the construct of the tribe, remember. All within this construct of community, of keeping it together with the glue of religion, of building, of having police, of having walls, of having banks, all of that stuff. This skill for the benefit of humanity is going to end. It's going to end. You're not going to have institutions that say, "Oh, these poor babies in that country on that river are getting this disease. Let's go send stuff right away." The humanitarianism, quote unquote, that's part of this age. This is not a natural quality of humanity. I mean, it's such a joke. We tend to see ourselves in the same way that when I meet somebody, I know they're not self. You know, I can tell. You can always tell. You can always tell people who are homogenized, you know? They're not unique, and you know it right away, and you feel it right away. And you know that when they're talking to you, that they're never saying what is truly unique. You know, I learned that when I was first a teacher. I had a wonderful experience here in Ibiza. You know, I taught at a local country school here in 83 and in 84. And I was teaching what would turn out to be the children of my friends. And there were moments when each and every one of these kids would quote their parents directly. You know? I mean, they would say something in such a way that you would know precisely which parent was that, and the way that the parent had said it to them. And the not self assumes that everything is them, that everything's their responsibility. They don't recognize that they are helpless. They can't, after all. It would be too frightening because they don't understand it. They don't understand what it means. You know, I had this funny thing with no choice. You know, I used to tell people all the time, look, there's no choice, and they get really upset. You know, because everybody thinks because they live in the illusion that choices are everywhere. And I had gone into the school to pay the fees for my kids. And the secretary, who was very sweet, said to me, you have lovely children. And she said to me, you've done a very nice job. And at first I was going to say no choice, but I figured that would upset her. So I said, I'm just lucky. I have discovered that saying I'm just lucky is even more provocative than saying no choice. You know, because it's basically the same damn thing. I mean, I love Lao Tzu. He was one of the very few thinkers from the past that I've been able to take into my body, and it just resonates cleanly. It's such a vanity to assume that you can interfere with the cosmos at any level. I mean, it's such an incredible vanity. And one of the things that I will enjoy about the dropping of this curtain is that vanity is going to take a kicking. Because all the pretension about what we think we are is all being supported by these institutions. And it's all being supported by these mechanisms that are not personal, that's just the wheel turning, and that we are expressing the program. You know, we are not humanitarian. It's a lie. It doesn't mean we're not capable of humanitarianism. We are. But even that is not a choice. It's the serendipity of a moment. We are killer monkeys. We will always be killer monkeys until there's no more of us. And that's not that far away, you know. I mean, this is the thing to realize. These forms do not permit us to transcend the very chemistry and the very biology, you know? I mean, people talk to me about peace on earth, and I tell them, look, think about your T cells. I mean, just for a moment, think about your immune system. You would not want to meet a T cell that was as big as you. You know, because the first thing it would do is eat you alive. Every moment of every second within our bodies, there are these savage things. And they're things, eh? I mean, they're things. And they're savage. They live in our cosmos. And if we didn't have them, we would die right away. And they are the most vicious, nasty little bastards you could ever imagine. And then the outside says, but we're basically peaceful. That we're basically nice. No, we're held that way by our institutions. We are taught that in our schools. We have these things enforced by our governments and the morality of our religions. I mean, you have to see that this construct over the last 400 years is such a fake. It's such a little patina over what we are. It's a way of protecting us from the truth. See, I don't see this as one of the great eras of humanity. I don't. Because it's a time of decay. And in this time of decay, I can see that all the strains that are moving out, that they are all lost, that they do not see what's happening. And so they do not surrender to what is possible. They don't. I'm waiting for that curtain to drop, because when that curtain drops and the sexuality that we have experienced for a very long time, for about 80,000 years, comes to an end. And then you'll see slowly that there is this possibility of humanity recognizing that there must be something worthy for them in this experience. 3 billion people live on less than €1 a day. I am every moment of every day aware of that. I cannot forget it for a moment, because the moment that I forget it, I forget the truth of the impersonal, cruel nature of what it is to be passengers in vehicles. And the moment that we think that we are in charge of these vehicles, and the moment that we think we're in charge of vehicles that are at the end of their assembly line and are not going to be replenished, we are going to get more and more depressed in the spirit. It's the spirit. I gave up doing individual readings. After 6,000 or 7,000 individual readings, I could not stand it anymore. To be in the aura of self-hatred. I mean, I couldn't stand it anymore. Human beings and their crap, you know, that they hate themselves, that they don't think that they're worthy, all this shit. Amazing. The grace of what it is to be in one of these vehicles, a miracle of what it is. And you see, there is this malaise. That's why you've got all these people running around trying to wake people up now. There's so many people running around trying to wake people up. Wake up, you know. They're all slowly sinking into this despair. So what we've looked at is that we've looked at the program of the cross of planning. That all of the things that we consider to be our finer attributes of maturation, our ability to sort of live with each other, our ability to find harmony in large communities, our ability, unlike rats, to live in crowded places and not kill each other all the time. It always amazes me when I go into one of these enormous city centers that people aren't killing each other. I mean, all the time, you know? I mean, rats do that. You cannot pack them too deep. I mean, I'm a Chinese rat. I mean, I understand that principle. Too many people in my aura, I immediately want to kill them. You know, I understand the principle. And how amazing that we have these layered in, institutional, educational, moralistic, religious constraints on us. And I keep thinking, they're going away, folks. And the plan, which is that without all of that vast expansion, we would never have, you know, most people say, well, the population, and we've got a population that's 6 billion plus. There's more people alive on the planet today than lived on Earth up until, I think, 1870. So you got an enormous, vast genetic pool. And with an enormous, vast genetic pool, what you have is the only real opportunity for mutation. And we know that there's a vast mutation at work. But think about the coldness of the program. It doesn't care that those 6 billion, most of them have a lousy life. It doesn't care that out of that 6 billion, that if you look at all the females on this planet, that 70% of their time is looking for firewood and water. Just so the program can have a large enough genetic pool so that we can have the potential for the coming mutation. When you begin to see the way the structure works, the way the mechanics work, it's time for us to get rid of the intellectuality that is trying to control the destiny of the planet and begin to turn our intelligence towards the recognition of purpose and the fulfillment of individual purpose. There is nothing else. You know, all you can do is watch the movie. You can't do anything else. And the gift of watching the movie. I was mentioning the other day, I was really working hard. You know, I've been bringing people a very, very long way in this knowledge. We've been doing this, some of us, for 10, 12 years together as teacher and student, going through all of these various layers. And the other day I finished by describing our work as being the musicians on the Titanic. And it's one of those images that I really liked. You know, when I saw that film, it was the only scene I really liked. It was the only one in that movie that touched me. This magic of these wonderful musicians playing, continuing to play as the ship goes down. And the beauty of that. And the beauty in the music. You know, the beauty in being in tune with the moment and the beauty of the moment. It's not about the ship going down. I don't tell you this to depress you. It's just a fact. It is our genetic direction, and it is going to happen. But not to get caught in what is a universal depression, a deep depression, and a depression that is not understood. The source of it's not understood, but the source is displaced into other things. They call it poverty, you know, they call it this, they call it that, they call it all these various things. But it's not all these various things. It's one thing. It's the species slowly shutting down. And it means that in the incarnations that are left, there's still, whatever, 1,600 years, according to this. There's time. It's not like you have to worry about keeping your shoes on. But the fact is that what's left is the only opportunity we have to enjoy the joke. I mean, because there is none. I live in the glory of knowing that there is nothing like me. There will never be anything like me. And at the same time, I realize that that's everybody else's potential. And that the very love that I have for myself is that there's nothing I can compare it to. I mean, there isn't. The beauty of human design is that it takes spiritual concepts and grounds them into simple scientific fact. We're each unique. And until we come to grips with the fact that in that uniqueness we have our own unique authority. Human beings do not know how to make decisions. The vast majority of humanity makes decisions with their mind, and as we know in this knowledge, no one can make decisions with their mind. That everyone has a unique place of authority within them, and if you rely on that authority, you will be correct. And all that means is that your vehicle, as it moves through this deteriorating, decaying environment, is going to meet less and less resistance. And in that, you begin to understand why you are here. What you're here to see. What you're here to meet. And what a gift that is. You know, it's always so clear to me, this business about being a source of knowledge. I'm really limited, after all. I only see in a certain way. The fact is that the knowledge was given to me, so I'm good at being its messenger. But me personally, I only see in my way. I only know what it is to be a clarion. I only know what it is to be an ego manifester. This is my job, to be me, and to be the expression of that. But we're each here to be the expression of our uniqueness, and you don't get there unless you have the right authority. And you're certainly not going to get there in these times when you have this vast deterioration taking place and you've got this terrible depression that's moving through humanity. Most of humanity is depressed, and on top of that, they are frustrated because most of them are generators. And they're angry as hell because they're manifestors. And they're disappointed, and they're all the things that we know of. You get caught in that, this looks like a terrible place to be. And then you don't see the beauty of it. And you don't see the magic. And you don't get to have the grace that comes with simply surrendering. So, whatever the story is, wherever I go in my knowledge, I always come back to the same place. These are times when individual authority is the only thing to nurture. I don't know about adults. It's to nurture in children. It's to make sure that they operate correctly and make sure that they know how to make decisions as themselves. You see, the propaganda of our time is that everyone can be an authority for you. Your government's your authority. Your lawyer's your authority. Your doctor's your authority. They all become authorities for you. Your priest is your authority. It goes on and on and on and on. Or transposed to God's your authority. All this bullshit. And this is the times. This is the program we've been under to hold us together long enough so that through all the detail, we can come up with necessary recognition and answers. That the consciousness can flower. That truth, whatever that is found. And that each and every one of us gets to see our value. I mean, the deepest sickness for me is the sense of human worthlessness. The valuelessness in people. How depressed they are about their worthiness, their importance, their purpose. This is the time to teach them because the door is closing. Those institutions are going to disappear. The opportunity to be the master to the disciples, the leader to the followers, is all coming to an end. This is a time to instill in anyone that you reach, is to instill the importance of their own authority and the emergence of their own authority. Because otherwise we're going to have a terrible time. We're going to have a terrible time when there isn't the collective tribal infrastructure to protect them.